Bonjour! Welcome to Rambo Loves History. I am your favorite French bulldog that takes you through mind-blowing history with style. Bonjour mes amis, I'm Rambo and welcome back to Rambo Loves History. What if I told you that a volcanic winter, a land shortage, and a brutal inheritance law transformed peaceful farmers into the most feared warriors in medieval Europe? That the Vikings weren't driven by bloodlust, but by something far more terrifying, starvation itself? In 793 AD, when Norse raiders struck the monastery at Lindisfarne, they didn't just steal gold, they stole Europe's sense of security. The North Sea had been a protective barrier for centuries. That June morning, it became a highway for terror. Today, we're uncovering how environmental catastrophe and social pressure created the Viking Age. More importantly, how this transformation didn't just change Norway, it fundamentally altered Western civilization. Because when those first longships left Norwegian fjords, they set in motion a chain of events that would create new kingdoms, discover new worlds, and reach America 5 centuries before Columbus. Let me take you back to early medieval Norway. Forget the oil-rich paradise we know today. Picture instead a country where only 3% of the land could grow crops. The rest, mountains, forests, and the ever-present sea. When the ice retreated 12,000 years ago, it left behind a landscape both beautiful and brutal. Deep fjords cutting into the mainland created isolated pockets of habitable land surrounded by towering peaks. Small communities clung to these narrow strips where every square foot of soil was precious. Archaeological evidence from sites like Kaupang shows us settlements growing barley and oats during brief summer months, supplementing their diet with fish from abundant seas. It was a hard life, but a stable one, until the climate turned. Tree ring data tells us a chilling story. Around 536 AD, something catastrophic happened, possibly a massive volcanic eruption in the tropics. The sun dimmed, temperatures plummeted. For Norway, already on the edge of agricultural viability, this was devastating. The Fimbulwinter of Norse mythology, the great winter that precedes Ragnarok, may well be a cultural memory of this very real catastrophe. Crops failed, livestock perished, perhaps half the population died. Those who survived faced a new reality. With less farmland supporting fewer people, Norwegian society underwent fundamental transformation. The law of primogeniture meant the eldest son inherited everything. Younger sons had no future on the family farm. They needed another path. Now here's where it gets interesting. Norwegian shipbuilding had been evolving for centuries, but by the 8th century they had perfected something revolutionary. The Gokstad ship, discovered in 1880, shows us exactly what they achieved. These vessels were marvels of engineering. Shallow draft allowed them to navigate rivers. Flexible construction let them ride ocean swells. Square sails gave them speed, while oars provided maneuverability. A longship could cross the North Sea, sail up the Thames, and beach directly on shore, all with the same vessel. As a French bulldog who appreciates good engineering, I can confirm this was the Tesla of medieval transportation. But technology alone doesn't explain the Viking Age. Young men with no inheritance formed warrior bands. Old Norse society celebrated these ventures. The sagas promised fame and fortune to successful raiders. Skalds composed poems celebrating their exploits. Even the Norse pantheon reflected this new reality. Odin, god of wisdom, was also god of war and death. The first recorded Viking raid, Lindisfarne in 793, sent shockwaves through Christian Europe. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records the horror: monasteries pillaged, holy things trampled, monks slaughtered or enslaved. But while Europe focused on the violence, something more complex was happening. These weren't mindless barbarians, they were entrepreneurs with swords. Norwegian Vikings established trading posts from Iceland to Constantinople. They founded cities like Dublin, Cork, and Limerick. In Normandy, the Norwegian Viking Rollo became ancestor to William the Conqueror. In the east, other Norsemen created the state that would become Russia. But wait until you see what happens next. The transformation reached its apex in the North Atlantic. When Harald Fairhair unified Norway around 872, he inadvertently inadvertently triggered a new wave of exploration. Political exiles and the dispossessed fled west, discovering and settling the Faroe Islands, then Iceland. Each step took them further from the overcrowded fjords of home. In 982, Eric the Red, exiled from both Norway and Iceland for murder, sailed west into uncharted waters. He found a land of glaciers and surprising green valleys. His masterful marketing? He named this harsh land Greenland to attract settlers. It worked. Within years, thousands of Norwegians had established farms along the southern fjords, but the most remarkable chapter came with Eric's son, Leif. Around the year 1000, following reports of land spotted west of Greenland, Leif Erikson led an expedition that reached what we now call Newfoundland. At Lanceau Meadows, archaeologists have uncovered remains of Norse buildings, proof that Norwegians reached the Americas 5 centuries before Columbus. They called it Vinland, the land of vines. And here's where everything changes. As Norwegian society stabilized under Christian kings like Saint Olaf, the very conditions that created the Viking Age began to disappear. Christianity brought new values, discouraging raids on fellow Christians. Centralized monarchy reduced the power of local chieftains who had sponsored Viking expeditions. European kingdoms developed better defenses. The Viking Age traditionally ends with the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066, where English forces defeated Norwegian King Harald Hardrada. But Norway's transformation continued. The descendants of Viking raiders became medieval merchants. The longships that once carried warriors now carried dried cod, klippfisk, Norway's most important export. The medieval kingdom of Norway reached its zenith under Håkon IV in the 13th century. Norwegian territory stretched from the homeland through Iceland and Greenland to the very edge of North America. Then came catastrophe. In 1349, a ship from England arrived in Bergen. Within days, people began dying. The Black Death had reached Norway. Perhaps 60% of the population perished. Entire districts were depopulated. Farms cultivated for 1,000 years returned to wilderness. The weakened kingdom couldn't maintain independence. Through royal marriages and political maneuvering, Norway entered unions first with Sweden, then Denmark. For over 4 centuries, Norway ceased to exist as an independent state. The proud kingdom of the Vikings had become a colonial possession, but geography and culture proved stronger than politics. The Norwegian people maintained their distinct identity through centuries of foreign rule. When nationalism swept Europe in the 19th century, writers like Henrik Ibsen created new Norwegian literature. Composers like Edvard Grieg drew inspiration from folk traditions. Explorers like Fridtjof Nansen and Roald Amundsen renewed the tradition of Norwegian polar exploration. In 1905, Norway peacefully dissolved its union with Sweden. The new nation was one of Europe's poorest countries. Then, in 1969, Phillips Petroleum discovered oil in the North Sea. The same waters that had carried Viking raiders now held liquid gold. But instead of squandering this windfall, Norway created a sovereign wealth fund that today exceeds $1 trillion. Modern Norway represents perhaps history's most successful transformation. The nation that once exported warriors now exports peace negotiators. The Oslo Accords exemplify Norway's modern role. The country that survived on marginal farmland now enjoys the world's highest standard of living. Yet the Viking legacy endures in unexpected ways. Norwegian shipping companies control one of the world's largest merchant fleets. Longships evolved into supertankers. The exploration tradition continues through research stations in both Antarctica and the Arctic. The egalitarian spirit of Viking Age assemblies influences modern Norwegian democracy. The story of Norway reminds us that geography shapes destiny, but human ingenuity can transform constraints into opportunities. Those medieval Norwegians who took to the seas weren't just raiders. They were adapters, explorers, and survivors who refused to accept the limitations of their harsh homeland. From the monastery at Lindisfarne to the oil platforms of the North Sea, from dragon-proud longships to billion-dollar sovereign wealth funds, Norway's transformation stands as one of history's most remarkable national journeys. So I leave you with this question. What drove greater human achievement? The comfort of abundance or the pressure of scarcity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story amazed you, you need to see how the Mongols built an empire that made the Vikings look like a neighborhood watch. Click that video now and subscribe so you never miss history with Rambo.